Dear friends, hi. Today we shall be discussing in detail about the basics of database system. Before starting the discussion about database systems, it is necessary to know about the concept of data and information. So, what is data? Data is defined as a collection of raw facts and figures. By raw facts and figures, we mean that data may be interrelated or not, but individually they have no meaning. For example, let us take some numbers like 1, 5, 4, 6, 0, 9, etc. Now, these numbers are data and they are not related to each other. Even they seems to have no meaning presently, as we do not know what these numbers are representing. Thus, it is the basic form of data, that is the data that has not been analyzed or processed in any manner. By this we mean that it is in the basic form of itself and it is not analyzed and processed anyhow for any particular task. And when it is analyzed and processed for a particular task, it becomes information. For example, when these given numbers will be analyzed and processed, these numbers can be used in many manners, like to represent any amount, any house number and so on. Thus, data without processing has no meaning and is raw. Now, let us proceed to define the term information. So, what is information? Information is defined as the processed data which is meaningful and useful. Once the data is processed, organized, structured or presented in a given context, it becomes useful. Then the data will become information. Looking at the figure, it is clear that when the given raw facts and figures, that is data, is processed, organized and represented in a useful manner, which can be used for some purpose like to make any decision, then that data is called information. For example, in the previous section we took the example of numbers. When these numbers are processed and then organized and presented in the form of time, then those useless numbers now useful in the given context of representing time. So, when we write it as 05 colon 06 colon 09, which means 5 hours 6 minutes and 9 seconds. Let us explore some more examples on data and information. Consider students' marks in a subject are treated as a data item, whereas class average marks of school's average marks in the same subject is information, which can be calculated from the data, that is students' individual marks. As another example, sales figure of different products in different cities over a time period are data items. When these sales figures are processed to find out average sale of a product in a particular city, becomes information. More precisely, the graphs or plots created from sales data to present the average sales are the information. Another example, a set of words would be data, but when these words are arranged in a proper manner to form some lines of text, it then represents information. Let the set of words as data be banking, project, ashu, doing, is, in, and when these words will be arranged in a proper manner, they become Ashu is doing project in banking, which is an information. Thus, data and information are interrelated. The word data is often used in the place of information, but it is necessary to make distinction between these two. Information is knowledge communicated or received concerning a particular fact or circumstance. Information is a sequence of symbols that can be interpreted as a message. It provides knowledge or insight about a certain matter. In a nutshell, the data, when organized, becomes information and is useful in making decisions. Now, after learning the meaning of data and information, let us have a look on the difference between data and information. First, the data is unprocessed facts and figures, whereas information is processed data. Second, the data is used as input to computer system, whereas information is the output of data. As we all know, computer is a device which takes data as input, process it and gives information as output. Thus, the information becomes output of input data to the computer system. Third, the data does not depend upon information, whereas information depends on data. This is a fact. We have found that information has no value for data. The data exists with or without the help of information. Information is not necessary to produce, collect or process any data, whereas in the case of information we need the data, because information is nothing other than the processed data represented and organized in a useful manner. Fourth difference, the data is not specific, whereas information is specific. The word specific here means that which is clearly defined and definite. As we have discussed earlier, we can say that data is not specific as it is a collection of raw facts and figures, and on the other hand information is specific as it is clearly defined and definite. That is why it is helpful in making decisions. Fifth, the data is a single unit, whereas information is a group of data which carries meaning. By this we mean that besides data is collection of raw facts and figures, but they are still individual and are not related to each other. Thus, they all are single unit, whereas information is a processed form of data and is meaningful. As a result, information becomes a group of data which carries meaning. Sixth, the data is raw material and information is the product. This has been discussed earlier that data is collection of raw facts and figures. So, data is a raw material, whereas when data is processed it becomes information which is the product of data. So, till this point we have learnt about the differences between the data and the information. Let us look at the qualities of the information. It must be meaningful. This means that information must contain some meaning, because without any meaning it is of no use and will not be more than just data. It must be accurate and clear. It means that the information must be correct and it should clearly understandable. It must not be of multiple meanings, because information helps in making decisions, so it must be accurate and clear. It must convey to the point and relevant information. Thus, information must not be a bunch of useless knowledge. It should be relevant and should give knowledge to the point. No unnecessary knowledge should be present in the information. It should confirm and correct the previous knowledge. This quality of information states that the information should be connected to the previous information of the same type and should confirm and state that the correctness of the previous information. It should reach at proper time so that proper action can be taken along with. As information helps in making decisions, so it must be reached to its place at proper time. Now, we will discuss the concept of database. Consider the example of customer records maintained by the bank. The bank keeps the record of customer name, customer address, customer bank account number, type of account opened, etc. for each customer. This is the database of customer records maintained by the bank for their requirements. Further, the bank also maintains the records of the transactions done by the customers on the day-to-day basis for future processing. Thus, these collections of records maintained by the bank about their customers, about their transactions being done on their accounts are the examples of the database. So, formally, a database is a collection of related data. By data, we mean non-facts that can be recorded and that have implicit meaning. Thus, in the example quoted here, the customer records and account transaction records are related to each other. Thus, database can be defined as a well organized collection of data that are related in a meaningful way, which can be accessed by different users but stored only once. Through these two definitions of database, it is said that the data that resides in database is well organized and related to each other in a meaningful way. The data can be recorded means that this data is used as records. For example, the record of an employee which consists of different data and all the data is related to each other. Also, the data that resides in the database can be accessed by different users, but it is stored only once. That is, the data that is accessed by different users need not to be stored again and again each time when any user accesses it. It is stored only once, and after that every user can access it. For example, in this figure, the bank stores data about their customers in a file known as customer details. and the customer details file stores the information of the customers as shown in the table. The bank also stores data about the loans taken by its customers. The loan details are stored in the file customer loan. The customer loan file stores the information related to the loan taken by their customers as shown in the table shown. It should be noted that the customer can avail multiple loans from the bank. Let us relate the bank database example with the features of the database mentioned in its definition. The customer data and the loan taken by them stored in the database is well organized and related to each other in a meaningful way. The record of a customer, which consists of customer personal details and the loan details related to that customer, is related to each other. The customer details once recorded in the bank database stored only once can be accessed by any number of different users. Thus, the data stored in these two files, customer details and customer loan, constitutes interrelated data. The data in the database is integrated, which means that the data is a collection of several distinct files, and all these files are connected to each other through some common data. As in the above bank database, both the files are integrated to each other through common data field, that is cust ID. These distinct files have this information as duplicate data, but the duplication of data in these files has been kept to the minimum. Thus, repetition of the data in the database cannot be avoided, but it can be minimized. Revisiting the bank database example again, there are two files, customer details and customer loan, in the bank database. The two files are distinct in the sense customer details file contains details about the bank's customers and the customer loan file contains details about all the loans taken by the customers of the bank. Both the files have the cust ID field. In order to sanction a loan to a customer, the bank requires the account number, that is account underscore number of the customer. There is no need to include the account number information again in the customer loan file, because it can always be discovered by referring to the customer details file. Now, just have a look on this block diagram of database. In this, we can see that in a database, data of various types are stored, which is related to each other, like data 1 and data 2. This data resides in a well organized manner, and different users like user 1, user 2, etc., can access the same database. Now, features of data in a database: it should be well organized, then the efficient use of data can be done. It should be related. Consider the above bank database in which the data stored in a file customer underscore details and customer underscore loan are related to each other through the field cust underscore ID. Hence, while generating any report about the particular customer loan details, both the personal details of the customer and his or her loan details can be clubbed in a precise way. It should be correct. Thus, if the data is correct, then we can get the correct reports can be generated and information required will be fetched from the database will be useful. It can be shared among different users as well as applications. Here, sharing means individual pieces of data in the database can be shared among different users. Different users can have access to the same piece of data. This data can be used by the users for different purposes. For example, the customer personal details can be used by the bank for sending them details about their new schemes. On the other hand, the other section of the bank requires the same customer details for generating the loan details for the customers. Hence, same customer details stored in the database has been used for the different purposes by different sections of the bank. It should be stored permanently so that the data can be used in future also. It should be accessible. If the data stored in the database is not accessible, then the data is no use and cannot be used for any purpose. It should be secured from unauthorized users' access. Thus, the data can be misused. In the bank database, the account details of the customer should not go in wrong hands, else it may lead to big loss to the bank, as any unauthorized user can change or delete the customer data. So, it should be kept secure and should be available only to the authorized user. It should be recoverable in the case of damage to the data. The backup of the data should be maintained and should be updated on the regular basis. Thus, in case of any damage to the data stored in the database should be recoverable. It should be flexible to change. The data of the database should be flexible to change. It should allow updation, deletion, insertion, etc. operations without any disturbance to the existing data. After looking at the features of the data stored in the database, we discuss about the application areas of the database. The databases are being used in most of the real life applications. We know that computer has become an essential part of our lives and it is being used in all the sectors. The main application areas of databases are banks, as we have seen cases of ATMs, customer details, loan details, etc. Thus, for storing the customer details we need databases. In libraries, books databases are to be maintained. In modern libraries, there is a facility of searching the books. Whether the book is available in the library, it has been issued to someone else, when is the possibility of its return, putting the request for next issue if it is available in the library, where it has been placed. These questions will be answered if the details of all the library books and other related information are stored in the library database. This will ease the task of maintaining the library books, subscribers details, issuing details, return details, find details, etc. In universities, employee details, student details, fee details, examination details, etc. need to be maintained for a number of purposes. These details will be stored in the database in such a way that whole data is related to each other and can be used by many users for different purposes. In enterprises, employee details, product details, client details need to be maintained for the number of purposes. Traveling, traveler details, flight, train, bus details, payment details, etc. are required for doing different tasks using this data. So, it is clear that databases are required in every sector of life these days. Now, the question arises, what are the operations that can be performed on databases? We know for maintaining huge databases, we need certain operations on data which helps in maintaining the data in the database efficiently. The most commonly used operations on the databases are insertion, means adding new data into a database. For example, to add new phone numbers into the telephone directory. Updation means modifying the existing data. For example, address of the telephone subscriber has been changed. Thus, it is required to update the database of address of the subscriber in the telephone directory. Deletion means to delete existing data from the database. For example, a person shifts from Chandigarh to Patiala, then the information related to the subscription of telephone need to be deleted from Chandigarh and telephone exchange database, and it should be added to the Patiala telephone exchange database. Selection means to view or retrieve the stored data. For example, to view a telephone number of a particular person, we can search his or her number from the telephone exchange database. In addition to these basic operations, many other operations on the database can be performed, like sorting, that is arranging the data in the ascending or descending order, merging, etc. With this, we come to end of today's lecture. Today, we have discussed about the introduction to the databases. We defined data, information and difference between data information. Then we learnt about the database, features of the database in the database, application areas of the database, operations that can be performed on the database. In the next lecture, we will discuss about traditional or file based approach and DBMS approach in detail. Thank you.